Imagine being blindfolded, shackled, and dragged into a room where every sound echoes like a death sentence. You don't know the time, the place, or even if you'll ever walk out alive. The air is thick with fear. The smell of sweat and metal chains lingers, and the men standing over you aren't here to ask politely. They're here to break you. This is the chilling reality of those caught inside the CIA's most secretive and extreme interrogations. From the very first moment, survival isn't about fighting back physically. It's about preserving your mind. Because in these dark chambers, pain isn't just physical. It's psychological warfare designed to erase identity, dismantle courage, and turn the strongest men into hollow shells. Interrogators know that the human mind is fragile when pushed to its limits, and they use that weakness like a weapon. Sleep is stolen, sound becomes a tool of torment, and silence is twisted into isolation so deep it feels like drowning in your own thoughts. Yet against all odds, some prisoners endure. Some resist breaking, not with fists or weapons, but with inner strength, clever mental tricks, and unshakable willpower. Their stories are not just tales of survival. They are proof of the human spirit's ability to endure even when crushed under unimaginable pressure. But make no mistake, these interrogations are not ordinary. They are engineered to push the body and mind into collapse. Prisoners are stripped of light, sound, and human contact until days blur into nights and reality slips away. Some are plunged into freezing cold cells, others chained in painful positions for hours, while some endure waterboarding, an experience so suffocating that survivors compare it to repeatedly drowning. Every second is a battle against panic, pain, and despair. And yet, hidden within this nightmare, there are moments of extraordinary resilience. A prisoner may repeat a single phrase over and over in his head, creating a lifeline of focus. Another might retreat into memories of family, childhood, or faith, building a mental sanctuary no interrogator can reach. Some use silence as a shield, learning that the less they react, the less satisfaction their captors gain. These techniques are the invisible weapons that help them withstand what should have been unbearable. What makes these survival stories so compelling is not just the brutality of what happened, but the question they raise. How much can a human being truly endure before breaking? The CIA's methods were designed to find that breaking point. But time and time again, certain prisoners proved that the human will can stretch further than even science or torture could predict. This is not a tale of heroism in the traditional sense. It's not about soldiers on battlefields or rebels with weapons. It's about survival in the darkest of rooms, where the only fight is within yourself. And it is here, in the shadows of the CIA's most extreme interrogations, that we uncover not just what torture does to the body, but what survival truly means. Inside the secretive world of CIA interrogations, brutality wasn't random. It was calculated, rehearsed, and sanctioned. Every method had one purpose: to strip a prisoner of resistance, to tear down their will until they would say anything, confess everything, and surrender completely. To understand how prisoners survived, you first have to understand what they were up against. One of the most notorious techniques was sleep deprivation. At first, it seems simple: keep a man awake. But when days turn into nights and nights stretch endlessly without rest, the body collapses while the mind begins to hallucinate. Prisoners were often shackled in standing positions or forced to remain upright for days on end, with blaring music or deafening white noise pumping into their cells. The interrogators knew exactly what they were doing. A brain deprived of sleep begins to betray its owner. Thoughts jumble, memories blur, paranoia takes root, and soon even the strongest prisoner begins to question reality itself. Then came sensory overload and sensory deprivation. Imagine being locked in a pitch-black cell where silence presses down on you like a weight, every second stretching into eternity. Or, on the opposite extreme, being bombarded with flashing lights, high-pitched sounds, and constant noise until your nerves feel like they're on fire. Both tactics had the same purpose: to shatter the mind's ability to stay grounded. Without balance, without rhythm, the brain spirals into chaos, and the interrogators would step in at the precise moment when confusion reached its peak. Perhaps the most infamous method was waterboarding, often described by survivors as a form of controlled drowning. A prisoner would be strapped down, cloth placed over their face, and water poured until the instinct to breathe transformed into raw panic. The body convulses, the lungs scream for air, and even though the prisoner isn't technically dying, every nerve in their body screams that death is seconds away. Interrogators use this not just to terrify, but to recreate the ultimate primal fear: suffocation. Few could endure more than seconds without breaking into sheer desperation. But physical torture wasn't limited to drowning sensations. Prisoners were often forced into stress positions, contorted postures that at first might seem uncomfortable but harmless, kneeling for hours, arms chained overhead or crouching in unnatural ways. Over time, muscles burned, joints screamed, and blood circulation faltered until the pain became unbearable. What made stress positions particularly cruel was that the prisoner essentially tortured themselves by trying to hold the position. The interrogator just had to wait. Then there was cold cell torture, locking prisoners in near-freezing rooms, sometimes dousing them with water beforehand. Shivering turned into trembling, trembling into uncontrollable spasms until hypothermia hovered dangerously close. In contrast, some cells were overheated to unbearable degrees, making survival a test of endurance against extremes that wore the body down inch by inch. And beyond the physical pain was isolation, arguably the most psychologically devastating technique. Prisoners could be left alone for weeks or months with no contact, no voice, no human face. In such solitude, the mind becomes both friend and enemy. Some prisoners spoke of hearing phantom voices, reliving traumatic memories, or spiraling into madness. The interrogators relied on that loneliness, knowing that when a human feels forgotten, hope is the first thing to die. What made these methods terrifying wasn't just their cruelty, it was their precision. Every technique was designed after careful study of the human body and psyche. The goal was not to kill, but to dismantle, to take a man apart layer by layer until only a shell remained, pliable and obedient. Pain was only part of it. The true weapon was the loss of control. Control over time, the body, even one's own thoughts. But within this darkness, survival strategies were born. Prisoners began to see patterns, to anticipate pain, and to discover the edges of human endurance. Some trained their minds to disassociate, some embraced pain as inevitable, and others created rituals to hold on to fragments of identity. Against science, against cruelty, they built invisible shields. And yet, the question remains, how does a human being survive when every system, physical, mental, and emotional, is under relentless attack? The answer lies not in strength of body, but in the hidden strength of the mind. In the darkness of those secret cells, survival wasn't about strength in muscles or weapons, it was about mastering the battlefield of the mind. Every prisoner who endured the CIA's extreme interrogations learned one hard truth: if you couldn't control your thoughts, you couldn't survive. Torture was designed to erase the self, but those who made it through developed hidden strategies, rituals, mental tricks, even fragments of imagination that kept them alive when everything else was stripped away. One of the most common survival techniques was compartmentalization. Prisoners learned to divide their mind into separate boxes: pain in one corner, memories in another, fear locked away in a different chamber. By doing this, they could endure the immediate suffering without letting it consume their entire being. It was a way to say, this pain is real, but it is not all of me. This mental distancing turned unbearable agony into something temporary, something survivable. Another powerful tool was creating imaginary worlds, Deprived of books, sounds, and faces, prisoners built entire universes inside their minds. Some relived their childhood in perfect detail, remembering the smell of their mother's cooking or the laughter of siblings. Others imagined walking through streets they once knew, replaying conversations, or even creating new ones. These mental escapes acted like oxygen, giving the mind somewhere to retreat when reality was too suffocating. For others, survival was about controlling the body's natural panic. Breathing became a weapon. By focusing on slow, steady breaths, prisoners could anchor themselves during waterboarding, cold exposure, or stress positions. Breathing became a reminder. I am still alive. I am still in control of this one thing. In an environment where everything was designed to steal control, the rhythm of their lungs was the last piece of power they held onto. Faith, whether religious or personal, was another unbreakable shield. Some repeated prayers endlessly, turning words into a lifeline. Others clung to the belief that one day they would be free, or that their suffering had meaning beyond the walls of the black site. This hope wasn't naive. It was survival fuel. Even the faintest belief in tomorrow was enough to endure the torture of today. There were also moments of psychological resistance, quiet rebellions that gave prisoners strength. Some refused to scream, even in agony, denying their interrogators the satisfaction of victory. Others used silence as a shield, withholding information no matter the cost. These small acts of defiance reminded them that they still had choices, however limited. Perhaps the most powerful survival strategy was holding on to identity. Torture aims to erase who you are, to make you nothing but fear and pain. But prisoners fought back by repeating their names, remembering their families, or focusing on the values they once lived by. In holding on to identity, they preserved their humanity, even when treated like objects. The remarkable truth is that survival wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about bending without shattering. Prisoners didn't escape pain. They learned to live inside it without losing themselves. In a place where every weapon was designed to strip away the human soul, resilience became the last, most powerful form of resistance. Behind every secret cell and every brutal method lies a survivor's story. Testimonies that reveal not only the physical agony, but also the invisible scars carried long after the interrogations ended. These accounts are haunting because they expose the truth that torture doesn't simply stop when the shackles come off. The body may heal, but the mind often remains trapped. One former detainee described waterboarding as being drowned over and over again, except your body doesn't get the relief of death. Even years later, he said that the sound of running water triggered panic attacks. Showers became impossible without fear, and sleep came only in short bursts, haunted by the memory of suffocation. This is the cruel legacy of torture. Long after the interrogator has left, the brain replays the terror endlessly, as if the victim is still strapped to that board. Another prisoner spoke of sleep deprivation as the most destructive weapon. After 7 days without rest, he no longer trusted his own senses. Shadows moved when no one was there. Whispers filled the silence, and his own reflection seemed like a stranger. Even after release, insomnia plagued him. He could never again fall asleep in peace, because his body had been trained to fear the vulnerability of unconsciousness. For him, sleep was no longer rest. It was a battlefield. The psychological wounds often cut deeper than the physical ones. Survivors describe living with hypervigilance, unable to sit in quiet rooms without feeling the walls closing in. Crowds became unbearable, silence even worse. The constant scanning of surroundings, the flinch at sudden noises, these were not habits easily forgotten. They were scars etched into the nervous system, the body's way of never letting the past go. Physical scars, too, told their own story. One man carried permanent damage to his shoulders after weeks in stress positions. Another spoke of constant tremors in his hands from nerve damage. Yet for most survivors, the physical pain was easier to accept than the mental torment. Bruises faded, but nightmares did not. Perhaps the most devastating testimonies came from those who felt their very sense of self fracture. Prisoners often said they emerged from CIA black sites as different people, hollow, disconnected, unsure of who they were. Some could not reconnect with family, unable to explain what had happened in those hidden rooms. Others found themselves broken in silence, unwilling to speak of it at all. Torture had not only attacked their bodies, it had stolen their voices. And yet, within these stories lies a thread of resilience. Despite the horror, many survivors eventually shared their experiences publicly, exposing the methods meant to remain secret. In telling their stories, they reclaimed power from the shadows. Each testimony was both a warning and a reminder that no matter how extreme the torture, some part of the human spirit endures. Their scars, visible and invisible, are proof of what these interrogations truly did. They weren't just tools for extracting information. They were weapons that reshaped lives forever, leaving survivors trapped between the world outside and the nightmare that never ended inside. In the end, the story of surviving the CIA's most extreme interrogations is not only about brutality, it is about resilience. Torture was engineered to erase the individual, to crush resistance, and to strip human beings down to nothing but fear. Yet again and again, prisoners showed that while the body can be broken, the spirit often refuses to die. Survival was not about walking out unscarred. It was about holding onto fragments of identity, hope, or faith in the middle of unimaginable suffering. The resilience of the human mind is perhaps the most shocking discovery to emerge from these dark practices. Interrogators believed every person had a breaking point, a line that could be crossed to guarantee compliance. And while many prisoners did break under relentless pressure, some did not. They found strength in silence, in memory, or in prayer. They proved that the human will, even when starved, beaten, and suffocated, can still resist in ways that defy science and logic. But survival in these conditions came at a heavy cost. The scars, both physical and psychological, are permanent reminders of what it takes to endure. Nightmares, flashbacks, trembling hands, broken sleep. These are not just side effects. They are lifelong companions for those who walked through the darkness and came out alive. Survival in torture chambers does not mean victory. It means carrying a burden forever. This raises a haunting question. What does it mean for a society to sanction such methods? The morality of torture is not just debated in politics or law, it is etched into the lives of survivors. Every scar is a testimony that extreme interrogation is not only a weapon against prisoners, but against human dignity itself. The justification has always been the same: national security, protecting lives, preventing attacks. But at what cost? When a nation trades its values for fear, it risks losing the very principles it claims to defend. And yet, even in the darkest cells, something powerful emerges: the truth that humanity is not so easily destroyed. The resilience shown by survivors is a mirror reflecting what we often forget: that courage is not loud, not heroic in the traditional sense, but quiet, internal, and relentless. It is the whisper that says, just one more minute, just one more breath, when everything else tells you to give up. The legacy of these interrogations is complex. On one side, they stand as some of the most controversial and secretive operations in modern history. On the other, they reveal the extraordinary capacity of the human mind to endure suffering and resist control. Survivors did not just live through torture. They carried forward proof of what it means to be unbroken in spirit, even when the body fails. In the end, the question is not only how prisoners survived, but what their survival means for the rest of us. Their endurance is a reminder of both the cruelty humans are capable of and the unshakable strength buried deep within us all. It is a warning of what should never be repeated, and a lesson that even in the darkest corners of human history, the will to live, to resist, and to remain human can never be fully extinguished